The Catholic Church in Los Angeles has paid victims of sexual abuse $1.5 billion. So the question is, what does the entire Catholic Church owe to an entire people that you violated? The institution of slavery could not, would not, will not have existed without the church. And that's just objectively true. The institution of slavery, the slave trade, without the church, none of this happens. And so as much as we talk about the government being responsible in America for descendants of slavery and owing reparations, what does the church owe? It's a good question, because this goes way back, right? So in 1452 and 1455, Pope Nicholas V, he formally supports Portugal and Spain mass kidnapping and enslaving Africans because it would help Christianize them, right? So the church is basically trying to extend its influence. It wants more people who, adhere to its philosophy. So have at it, do you, right? Okay, so, all right. Now in school you learned in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. What you didn't learn is that in 1493, right after that in 1493, Pope Alexander VI, he issues this whole thing, and he's just like, Spain, Portugal, all that land that y'all might find out there, have at it. And while you're there, if you find any, indigenous people, any Africans, you are free with our blessing to enslave them. Okay, I guess that's one way to do it. All right, so in 1548, Pope Paul III uses apostolic authority to say the slave trade is legal in the eyes of the church, like you good. Now, you got to understand, when they say apostolic authority, this man is saying, I know I done heard from the Lord. I know I got a word. He uses apostolic authority to say this is all good in the eyes of the church. It is legal. Now, what that does is very important. All these European countries, all these European monarchies are like, wait, so we can do this and still go to heaven? Are you sure? That makes this whole thing explode. It makes the whole thing explode big time. Again, without the church, you don't have this. This is a real thing. And so essentially what the church is looking at is, if we can baptize people or, influence people, the church grows its influence. And of course, the church is making money along the way. All these other people are just trying to make money, pure and simple, but they have the blessing of the church. And at that time, you got to understand, the church was the law. The Catholic Church was it. And so when the Catholic Church says you're cool and you can still go to heaven, people think, okay, I can still go to heaven and make this money. The Catholic Church is very much culpable in this. This is what starts this whole thing. There's no way around that. And so there's no need to get sensitive. It's not like I'm trying to beat up on the church. It's just being objective. This is the history. So if somebody breaks into your home and steals a bunch of stuff, and you find out later it's, someone that you actually know, are they not still responsible? Yeah, you still did it. I may like you. It doesn't mean you didn't do it. It doesn't mean you're not responsible. This is the history. So the Catholic Church kind of sets the thing in motion, and then everyone else takes their cue. And so later you have the Church of England that is literally operating whole plantations with some very barbaric practices, whippings, and people are wearing iron collars and branding people, like all the things that you think of in plantations in the Deep South. These British colonists get it from somewhere. Like, by the time you get to the colonies in America, people are well versed in the idea of slavery and human trafficking and treating people this way, because the church has said it's cool for the sake of expanding their power base and money. And so then you get to stories like in the state of Georgia. My family was enslaved in Georgia. A lot of people don't know that Georgia was originally not a slave state. The state constitution did not allow for black slavery. But that changes when George Whitefield, a very famous revivalist preacher, comes to Georgia and he wants to start this orphanage, but the numbers aren't quite working. How do you get around that? Slavery. And so he lobbies for slavery in Georgia, and Georgia then becomes a slave state. So we come back to the question, if the United States government owes reparations to descendants of slavery, what about the church? Particularly the Catholic Church. But we don't have to stop at the Catholic Church. I talk about George Whitfield. I talk about, we can keep going here. Like, we got plenty of smoke for everybody. By the way, if this is interesting to you, if you want to learn more about this kind of stuff, I have a history course. It is a year-long course. It stretches over a whole year. It's called Race Critical. You can go to racecritical.com. I definitely want people to understand American history is complex. And in schools, we're really not teaching history. It's not just a Black history course. Black people are very much a part of American history, but this is U.S. history broadly. It examines history through the lenses of power, money, and race/national origin. These are the things that help you understand the world. Power, money, race, national origin. Anyway, go to racecritical.com. It is a year-long course, and we have a special promo right now. For $4.99, you can get access. That will change starting March 31st, so jump on this promo. Now, back to the story. We got smoke for everybody. We can go up and down the roster. It's not just the Catholic Church, but if we're going to be fair, if the United States government is guilty and owes reparations, and they do, what about the church? What about the church? And now, to be sure, some people will say, look, man, that was a long time ago. I want to hear that. Well, if somebody commits a crime and breaks in your home and kills your wife or your husband, and they hide out for years and years and say, you know what, that's old now. No, man, you still did it. Because the reality is, people, and not just Black people, you had white abolitionists before slavery was even abolished arguing for reparations. And at every turn, and at every generation, every decade, every year, America has just said no. And so just because your grandfather said no, and his father said no, that doesn't mean you're not still guilty. You can't just rope it over and then expect you to forget it. No, the bill is still due. So to say, well, you were not enslaved or it didn't happen in this generation. Yeah, but the people that it actually happened to, they did ask. And you refused them. And so the bill is still sitting on the table. You got to pay the check. So anyway, there's your question. Does the church owe reparations? And what does that look like? If you want more, again, check out my history course, racecritical.com. Also, I have a podcast, Blackjack. We examine how the civil rights movement went left. Check out the Blackjack podcast, anywhere you get your podcast from.